In the middle of Hollywood, the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel has been a popular place for celebrities and movie lovers for a long time. Hi, I'm Alina, welcome back to my channel. The Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel has a long and interesting history. It opened its doors on May 15, 1927. In its first year, it became a popular spot for celebrities from Hollywood. They either visited it often or stayed there for extended periods of time, making it feel like a second home to them. In the 1950s, the hotel started going downhill. Over the next few decades, there were some really bad renovations. Then in 1985, Radisson Hotels bought it. They spent $35 million fixing it up, making the lobby beautiful again, and putting in a 3-tier fountain. The Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel has 300 guest rooms and 63 suites that are packed with history. There's a penthouse named after Clark Gable and Carole Lombard and a suite dedicated to Marilyn Monroe. Plus, they've got poolside cabanas that make you feel like you've time traveled to the 1950s. The hotel has a really big area for events, more than 25,000 square feet. Inside there are different rooms like the Blossom Ballroom where they had the first Academy Awards. There's also the Oscar Room, Academy Room, Historic Lobby, Johnny Grant Gallery space, the bridge, and the garden. But behind all this fancy stuff is a spooky secret. The hotel has many ghostly guests who have never left. People staying at the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel said they've seen the ghost of Marilyn Monroe. She is usually seen in her favorite room, Suite 1200. Marilyn Monroe spent a lot of time at the Roosevelt Hotel. She even did her first commercial there, posing on a diving board to promote toothpaste. The pool area, called the Tropicana Pool, is said to be filled with a lot of spirit energy. An artist named David Hockney painted a mural there, and Patti Negri, a medium, says that it's really buzzing with energy. As Monroe became more famous, she often stayed in a room on the second floor of the Roosevelt Hotel. From there, she could see the pool. The hotel gave her a big wooden mirror, and after she died, they moved this mirror to the manager's office. Once a maid was cleaning the mirror when she saw the reflection of a sad blonde lady. She turned around to ask if the lady needed help, but nobody was there. Now you can't see the mirror at the Roosevelt Hotel anymore, but you can stay in the Marilyn Monroe suite. Marilyn Monroe's ghost is a hardworking one. People often claim that they also see her around her old house in Brentwood. Some say she shows up in mirrors near the Santa Monica Pier too, where she used to go in disguise to watch families having fun. You can visit her grave at Westwood Village Memorial Park. And guess what? Hugh Hefner, the founder of Playboy, is also buried nearby. Montgomery Clift, who was a close friend of Elizabeth Taylor and was nominated for Academy Awards 3 times, is still lingering in room 928 and a nearby hallway, even though he's dead tired. Clift isn't like Monroe when it comes to mirrors. He's often heard playing his trumpet, maybe to remind everyone to keep improving even after life. His shadow has been seen walking in the halls or watching over guests in his room, like a ghostly security guard keeping them safe from, well, him. In room 928, a guest shared her story. She was reading in bed while her husband slept next to her, and suddenly she felt a soft pat on her shoulder. She thought it was her husband wanted to talk, but he was actually still asleep. It turns out even ghosts like bedtime stories. The famous psychic Peter James once stayed in room 928. He saw Clift's ghost sitting in a chair in the corner. Peter watched the ghost for a few minutes as it relaxed before disappearing. Apparently, ghosts need breaks too. Caroline is the youngest ghost living in a hotel. She met Peter James in 1992 in the Academy Room. Then they met again in a penthouse library. One day, Peter found Caroline crying. When he asked her why she was crying, she told him she was worried about her mom. Peter wondered how he could help, but Caroline disappeared before he could do much. Caroline can still be seen wandering around the hallways looking for her mom. Sometimes guests and workers think that it's a real child because she wears a pink jacket and jeans. Once even a receptionist thought that she was a normal kid, just sitting and playing in the lobby. There is this classic guy who looks like he's from the 1920s, maybe even an actor. He goes to the Blossom Ballroom a lot, always dressed up in a fancy tuxedo like he's going to a big event. Some psychics think he was up for an award and went to an Oscar banquet once. They say he's still holding on to his dreams of being a star. At the Blossom Ballroom there is also another male ghost who wears a tuxedo and plays the piano. Guests who were exploring the upper floor heard his ghostly tunes. When they looked down from the balcony, they saw him playing the piano before he disappeared, leaving only his ghostly music behind. People eating at a restaurant in West Hollywood have seen the ghost of Jim Morrison in the bathroom, the frontman of The Doors. This restaurant is located at 8512 Santa Monica Boulevard, which used to be a recording studio called The Doors Workshop. This place remembers when The Doors recorded their album Love Woman in 1970s, and some customers claim that they've heard Jim Morrison singing some songs from that album in a bathroom. West Hollywood has this famous place called Chateau Marmont on 8221 Sunset Boulevard. This hotel is known to be haunted. You might have heard of John Belushi from Saturday Night Live and movies like Animal House. Sadly, he passed away in one of the hotel rooms, Bungalow 3, because of a drug overdose in 1982. People who stay there often feel like someone is watching them, especially when they look in a bathroom mirror. One family who stayed in the room claimed that they've seen their son talking to himself, and when they asked him who he was talking to, he said that funny man. In Beverly Hills, there's a story about George Reeves, an actor who played Superman. He passed away in 1959 in a mysterious shooting. Some people believe that it's a curse linked to Superman. George Reeves used to live on Benedict Canyon Drive, and people who pass by claim that sometimes they hear gunshots and screams, and some people even claim that they've seen George dressed as a Superman. People say Houdini's ghost still lingers at a house where he stayed once at 2400 Laurel Canyon Boulevard. Houdini was a famous magician and escape artist, and he passed away on October 31st, 1926. It's been a spot for scary high school parties and attempts to talk to Houdini through seances, even though he wasn't a fan of that. Back in 1899, there was a place called Hollywood Cemetery, which later became Hollywood Forever. Hollywood itself was pretty young, only 12 years old. It was mostly farmlands with orange groves and fields of beans. The population at that time was about 500 people. Hollywood wasn't even a city yet, and it would take another 11 years for it to become part of Los Angeles. Mary Gower, an early resident of Hollywood and its first school teacher, owned a big piece of land. She sold 60 acres to Samuelson, a businessman from Nebraska. He started the Hollywood Cemetery Association and bought another 40 acres from Gower. The association had 8 important people from LA's business world, such as Homer Laughlin and Isaac Van Nuys. The Gower family used to farm on land owned by Isaac Lankershim, who was Van Nuys' father-in-law. Mary Gower and her family are buried at Hollywood Forever, and a major street near the cemetery is named after them. Interestingly, Pierce, a famous photographer from early 1900s Los Angeles, was married to one of the Gower's daughters for more than 50 years. He is also buried at Hollywood Forever. Building the Hollywood Cemetery was tough. People in the area didn't want it. They even told the city council that it would make the neighborhood look gloomy and perhaps would make their homes worth much less money. They said that the association didn't get the permission from the Board of Supervisors to build a cemetery there like they were supposed to. Then in 1899, LA County took the Cemetery Association to court. The Cemetery Association lost the case first, but they appealed to the California Supreme Court. Luckily for them, the Supreme Court said that they could go ahead and build it. Back in 1901, they buried Highland Mary Price, who was married to a blacksmith in Hollywood, and some people say that the street nearby is now named after her. Then, the next year, they put a big stone chapel and a bell tower in the middle of the cemetery. But those buildings aren't there anymore. In 1902, Griffith paid $6,000 to get a huge obelisk. It was 40 feet tall and meant for him. But just a year later, he did a terrible thing. He shot his wife in the face. And 17 years after that, he passed away because his liver stopped working. Early on, the Hollywood Cemetery Association made the locals feel better by introducing them to a new type of burial ground. It wouldn't be like the old messy church cemeteries they knew from the East. Instead, it would be like a peaceful park with lots of green grass, lakes, and natural beauty. The grave markers would be low and simple, sometimes flat on the ground. Any above-ground crypts would be made of strong stone like granite or marble, in classic styles. Overall, the goal was to create a place for peaceful things. The Hollywood Cemetery was one of the first parks on the West Coast designed like a lawn. It has always been innovative. They planned to build a crematorium there in 1901, which was quite early for that type of burial. This was even before cremation became widely accepted. People, led by former US Senator Cornelius Cole, didn't like the idea and protested. They managed to delay the opening of the crematorium until January 1928. Interestingly, Senator Cole was buried there after he died. The cemetery was also ahead of time in its marketing. In 1924, they hired professional filmmakers to make a colorful promotional video. This was years before color films became common. They showed this video at funeral director conventions all over the country. Hollywood Forever Cemetery has a big connection to Hollywood's growth. Back in 1970, a company called Peralta Place Incorporated bought some land from the cemetery. Then, one of their leaders, Robert Brunton, made it even bigger. Later in 1920, another company called Robertson Coal, which was into import-export, jumped into movies and bought some more land near the cemetery. Later, this land became RKO Pictures. But the most important link for Hollywood Forever is with Paramount, which is now its neighbor. Back in 1901, the same year the cemetery started, Colonel Robert Northam built a bar nearby. Then in 1913, two guys named Cecil DeMille and Jesse Lasky bought that bar. They made the first ever Hollywood full-length movie there called The Squaw Man. In the mid-1920s, DeMille and Lasky's company, famous Players Lasky, needed more space for their film business. They bought a place called United Studios, which used to be the Peralta Brunton Studios. They moved everything, including their barn, to this new spot. After that, their company got a new name, Paramount Pictures. DeMille and Lasky both passed away in the late 1950s and were buried at Hollywood Forever Cemetery. During the 1920s and early 1930s, Hollywood and the cemetery both grew a lot. The cemetery got bigger and fancier, and many of the buildings we see nowadays were built during that time. In the 1930s, the cemetery went through changes when it got new owners. They made not so good decisions. People riding the trolley complained about seeing graves during their morning rides. So a big wall was built along Santa Monica Boulevard to hide the cemetery. The new owners also tried to sell some land to some businesses in order to pay for that wall, but they couldn't because the rules didn't allow. In 1939, the cemetery was owned by Jules Roth. He was a shady, rich criminal who tricked people out of money in the 1920s by pretending to have an oil company. When his scheme fell apart, he was caught in New York and sent back to Los Angeles to go to prison at San Quentin. He got out of jail in 1937 and started buying shares in the cemetery. He said he did it because his parents were buried there. In just 2 years, Roth pretty much owned the cemetery and renamed it Hollywood Memorial Park Cemetery. But he didn't change his ways. He stole money from the cemetery's fund in order to buy things for himself. On top of this, Roth wasn't keeping up with taking care of the cemetery. Crypts and headstones were breaking, the grass wasn't getting cut, bad people were causing trouble, and even water was leaking into the Jewish mausoleum. The crematory had to close in 1974 because it was in a really bad shape. Cass Elliot from The Mamas and Papas was the last person cremated there, and even then things were falling apart. In 1987, the family of Max Factor moved his remains somewhere else because they were so unhappy with how the cemetery was being taken care of. An article in the Los Angeles Times from 1988 says that the California Cemetery Board got more complaints about Hollywood Memorial Park than any other cemetery in the state. By the 1990s, Hollywood Memorial Park was making more money from digging up the bodies than burying them. Jules Roth passed away in 1998 and was buried near his parents at Hollywood Cathedral Mausoleum. The cemetery was financially struggling at that time. Two buyers offered $400,000 for it, much less than its actual value, but even then they backed out when they realized how much it would cost to restore it. In April 1998, Tyler and Brent Cassidy, from a family that owned many funeral homes and cemeteries in St. Louis, bought the cemetery for $375,000. They renamed it Hollywood Forever and started fixing it up. They even got the crematory working. The Cassidys didn't just fix things up, they also turned Hollywood Forever into a place of culture. They started showing movies outside, which brought a lot of people to the lawn behind the Douglas Fairbanks Memorial. They also hosted musical acts at the Masonic Lodge, and since 2002 they've been offering tours. The Cassidy family faced legal problems too. In 2013, Brent Cassidy and his father got in trouble for fraud and money laundering. They used money meant for prepaid funerals. Brent went to jail for 5 years, wrote a book about it, and now speaks publicly about his experience. Tyler Cassidy wasn't involved in the wrongdoing. He seems to be the only family member handling Hollywood Forever's daily work. A lot of famous people are buried in the cemetery. One of them is Mel Blanc, the voice behind Looney Tunes. Another notable person laid to rest here is Griffith, who donated Griffith Park to Los Angeles. In a cemetery where a lot of people are buried, some are resting peacefully. There are also some who are not resting peacefully. People often encounter a crying woman by the lake near the cemetery. They say she's an actress who died in 1921, but no one knows for sure. Just a few steps away from the cemetery in Lemon Grove, there is an entrance to Paramount Studios, which is considered to be one of the most haunted movie studios in the area. People claim that they've seen ghosts dressed like they are from the 1930s and 1940s. The guards working the night shift at the gate say that they've seen the ghost of Rudolph Valentino walking into the studio. Rudolph died when he was only 31 years old. It happened in 1926 after he had surgery for an ulcer. More than 100,000 people gathered outside the place where they held his funeral. Some people say they used a wax model of him in order to protect his body during the service. They buried Valentino inside the Hollywood Forever Cemetery. At first, he was in a temporary spot inside the Cathedral Mausoleum. They planned to build a big memorial with statues of him, but the temporary spot turned out to be a friend's plot. Sadly, that friend passed away the next year from a heart attack and now rests next to him. Valentino's family bought a crypt for his friend's widow. So what was supposed to be a temporary spot became his permanent resting place. After he was buried, a mysterious woman started showing up. She wore all black, even a veil, and only appeared on the anniversary of his death. People thought she might be his fiancé when he died. She'd leave roses on his grave. Some women claimed to be her, but none of that was true. Once there was a man who died in 1966. He acted in 3 movies. Now his ghost is sent to haunt the Psalms and Abbey mausoleums. People claim to hear whispers, see weird lights, feel chilly drafts, and even catch whiff of cologne around the mausoleum. But it's not just there. His old house is also reportedly haunted by him. In 1921, Virginia went to a party on Labor Day at the St. Francis Hotel. It was a big bash for Roscoe Arbuckle, who just got a big contract. But Virginia got so sick at the party that she had to be taken to the hospital in an ambulance. Sadly, she passed away a few days later when she was only 26 years old. No one knows for sure what happened to her. Some people even say that Arbuckle hurt her, but he was found not guilty. Even that, his reputation took a big hit because of it. Now, if you visit Virginia's grave, you might feel a chilly breeze and hear crying. Lots of people who visited the cemetery claim that they've experienced some strange things happening there. Nowadays, Hollywood Forever Cemetery is a nice place to visit, especially if you're a fan of celebrities buried there. But don't be scared if they seem to still be active. Whether it's Virginia or others, you might see something unusual, but don't worry, most of them keep to themselves and do their own thing. And thank you for watching, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!